most helpful thing we can actually do is to leave the relationship with that person, kind of let them just fall and hit rock bottom. And then in doing so, hopefully they'll kind of begin to want to change as their life kind of, completely goes down the shitter without having someone to like bail them out every time.
Applies to addiction, but it can also happen in relationships where one person is emotionally immature, irresponsible, or has a mental illness that they aren't caring for.
Oof.
I heard codependency once described as one person has an addiction to a substance or thing, and the other person is addicted to caring for them. And that pretty much sums it up.
Yeah. Wow. That's great.
Starting off with number 7, we will need to untangle ourselves from other people. Do we spend all of our time with one person? Maybe we struggle to make any decision without asking someone for their thoughts or advice on it first. Do we feel like we're walking on eggshells around those we're closest to, or trying to do everything perfectly so that we don't stress them out or upset them? In order to do any of this work, we are going to have to put some healthy space between us and those we're in relationships with. Because unfortunately, when we struggle with codependency, it usually finds its way into all of our relationships. So stepping away for a bit to assess and adjust is going to be a really important step.
And again, it's because a lot of it can be this ingrained difficulty with boundaries, right? And so if you have difficulties with boundaries in your romantic relationships, you're probably likely to have it in all types of relationships, right? Respecting your own boundaries, but also respecting other people's boundaries, right? Getting into the over caretaker kind of thing.
Number 6, we will need to communicate with our partner or friend about the changes that we're going to try and make. If we're going to work to change the rules of how we interact with others, we need to let them know first. I know it's hard to have these kinds of conversations, but it could be saying something as simple as, I've been telling you, I'm trying to work on myself. And in doing that, I realize that I'm not the best with boundaries in my relationships. So I'm going to be trying to improve that. And I promise to explain as much as I can as I work through it. We can also tell them that it's okay to ask questions or express any concerns that they have while we're...
If you have like friend or a romantic relationship that you can like be that like open and direct to, and that conversation goes well, that is a pog ass person in your life. Like that's a keeper right there. I'm just thinking about like everyone in my life and like, in terms of like friends and family and stuff like that. I'm like, man, 90% of the people in my life, that conversation would not go. They'd be like, what the hell is wrong with you?
Doing this work, right? Overall, this is going to be great practice for us and will ensure that we don't accidentally damage any important relationships in our life while we work to change. The 5th way to heal is to begin to understand boundaries and how to put them in place. Boundaries are important so that others know how to treat us and we know how to treat them. They ensure each relationship is healthy and respectful. When we're codependent, we often don't have any real independence. And so we can think that by telling someone no or not being able to do everything someone asks of us, that we're being selfish, or that boundaries only exist in all or nothing terms, like it's either all about them or it's all about us. But healthy boundaries are not so extreme. They are there so that we can take care of ourselves. And by doing that, we will be able to be there for our loved ones when they need it. Like putting these in place in all of our relationships is going to be key to healing from codependency. Moving on to number 4, we will need to be a detective for our patterns. Just like everything in life, codependency is going to look different for each and every one of us. Some of us may find it applies to our friendships, and those relationships being all give without getting anything back. Others of us may find that it applies exclusively to our romantic relationships and us being attracted to people who seem to need us or make us feel like we have a purpose.
And she brings up a good point with this that I want to take a second to make a comment on. Watch out for codependent patterns in not only your romantic relationships, but also your friendships. I've known people that are just like, oh yeah, I'm that person that everyone turns to for support. And Like I'm thinking in particular this one female friend that I had for a while, no longer in my life, but she was like, oh yeah, I just constantly am the person that people turn to for support, and then I'll get to the point where I'm so drained and exhausted that I just have to retreat and cut everyone off for a while to recharge my batteries. And I'm like, back then I was like, oh wow, this person's like a very giving, dependable person. But even back then I was like, it sounds like you just need to set boundaries with them. Now I know. I'm like, oh, that person was hella codependent was the problem. So if you ever know someone in your life that's like the person that everyone turns to and unloads their shit on, and they're constantly just giving, they're like the Mother Teresa of your friend group, but then they'll also be constantly complaining about feeling drained and just having to caretake for people too much and constantly being the shoulder to cry on, and even maybe feeling like it's uneven or something, that person probably really struggles with codependency.
Whatever it is, it's important to figure out our pattern so that we can more easily identify ways that codependency is affecting us and our relationships. So start noticing the ways that you put others first or fixate on others versus focusing on yourself, and just see what you find out. Remember, we have to be curious, not judgmental as we work through this. Number 3, get to know yourself. This takes time.
It is harder
Often
than it
when we've
sounds,
been codependent for a long time, possibly our whole lives, we may not know what we like, don't like. And making decisions about these things can feel impossible because we never had the chance or gave ourselves a chance because we're too busy focusing on someone else. So try things out. Try new music, movies you've never seen or thought you didn't like I don't like horror films, or I don't really like rom-coms. Watch them. Find out.
Does anyone like rom-coms? Oh, I just want to take a sec. No. Yeah, I feel like I really struggled with this when I was kind of getting older, like in the later stages of my 20s. I feel like I woke up and I was like, I don't know what the hell I'm interested in life, and I bounced around from thing to thing to thing. The good result of that being I have studied and done many things in my life, which is cool because I'm a generally knowledgeable, well-rounded person, but a lot of that came from just really not knowing who I was earlier in life and what I was interested in. And so if you're, and it's funny because that can even be, that can even sometimes look like borderline personality disorder. So there's a time in my life where I thought that might have been a thing for me, because with both codependency and borderline personality disorder, there's this lack of a stable sense of self that happens. Now, borderline, there's a lot more kind of emotional turbulence and stormy relationships and oftentimes trigger warning, self-harm behaviors and that sort of thing that goes along with it. So if that's maybe not so much characteristic of your behavior, but you really empathize with, yeah, man, sometimes it's just really hard to set boundaries with people, and I feel like growing up I never really knew who I was because I got so used to putting other people's needs aside. And codependency might really be a thing for you.
Try new food, activities, whatever you can think of. Give yourself a chance to try it. See if you like it. And if not, go ahead and move on and try something else. But give yourself the time to try new things. It's okay to not be good at it, or not know what works or what you like or don't like. It's like we have to give ourselves a chance to learn and make decisions on our own. And since that can be so incredibly foreign, be patient and kind with yourself. We could also feel the need to do everything perfectly as a side effect of our codependency.
Yeah.
So do your best to
that.
give yourself permission to do things incorrectly or wrong, because that's really part of learning and growing. Number 2, we're going to check our facts. Unfortunately, one of the side effects of codependency is that we look to other people to validate who we are, or that we're doing things right. And therefore, we can constantly judge ourselves, assume others are judging us too, and that they don't like us or that we're doing something wrong, which is why we need to check our facts on these thoughts. Instead of letting them live in our heads, assuming that they're true and continuing to think them. Thoughts are just thoughts. Remember that. And having a thought more than once doesn't make it a fact. So pay attention to what you say to yourself about yourself and check your facts on it. I know, this sounds incredibly tedious. So start with your top 5 most common judgy thoughts and see if you have any facts that can back them up. Facts, remember, not thoughts. Because chances are we don't have any that back them up. And then maybe consider what the facts actually do support. You might be surprised by what you find out. And finally, number 1, give therapy a try. I know it's hard to reach out and speak up about something that we're struggling with.
Yeah, regardless of whether this resonates with you or not, just fucking everyone go to therapy, please. Just take this moment, this commercial brought to you by A Place to Heal. Everyone should be going to therapy. I don't think there's a single person out there in this world that should not go to therapy, at least on a semi-regular basis. So, Pog comment of the day by Katie Morton here.
Alone to talk to a stranger about it, but trust me when I tell you it can change your life. Yes, behavior change is hard, and it can feel like it's just going against every fiber of our being, which is why it's important to work with a therapist so that they can help you push through that discomfort and be a safe person to check in with as we try those new things and encourage us when we need it along the way. If therapy isn't available, or maybe it's not affordable for you, there is such a thing as Codependence Anonymous, and it's free online or in person. And
so, Codependent Anonymous, I've actually attended some of their sessions before in my own journey of recovering from stuff. They are a 12-step program. I want to take a quick second to talk about 12-step groups. Let's see. List of 12-step programs. So, one of the biggest barriers to people getting mental health care is the cost, right? If you've got insurance, sometimes mental health, like therapy sessions, can be covered by insurance, sometimes not. Sometimes it's a limited amount. Sometimes you get 3 sessions. Sometimes you get 6 sessions. For those of you out there that are interested in working on your mental health, whether it's codependency or otherwise, but cost is a factor, I'll say 2 things. 1, if cost is the primary factor, do feel free to be honest with your therapist about it. Quite often, there are many therapists out there that work on a sliding scale. I know I've been the beneficiary of this before. When I was younger, was very financially unstable, I had times where I'm like, I just lost my job and I would really love to keep seeing you, but right now I just can't afford it. I can't afford $120 an hour out of pocket for a 1 hour of therapy session. And I've had therapists that'll cut me a deal and be like, hey, can you afford this? And in a couple months, we'll revisit this conversation once you get stable. So I've been the beneficiary of sliding scale stuff. Most therapists don't go into the mental health field to become rich, right? We go into the mental health field because we want to help people. That's who we are, because we're empaths and highly sensitive people, and some of us struggle with codependency issues. Statement not reference to myself at all. But if that is not your speed, or for whatever reason you can't have access to a therapist, 12-step groups are a great substitute for that, or addition to that, right? So 12-step groups, most people are familiar with, say, Alcoholics Anonymous, which is a 12-step group. Some of these have originally they were created, they're completely free, they're completely volunteer run, quite often by people who have completed their own recovery journey. So for example, in Alcoholics Anonymous, quite often the people who are running those meetings are people who have recovered and become sober themselves, and then they turn around and they want to help other people, right? Because that's how we all are on this field. We overcome our own stuff, then we turn around and we help pull other people that are struggling still up, right? So there are a number of different 12-step groups. Alcoholics Anonymous is probably the most famous one, but there are all different kinds of ones. So there's one for hard drug users. There's ones for families of, there's one called Al-Anon, which is for families of people who struggle with substance abuse. One's for gambling addiction, love addiction. And then there's also CODA, which is Codependence Anonymous. So for people working to end patterns of dysfunctional relationships and develop functional and healthy relationships. So, and if you just hop on Google and you say like Codependence Anonymous or Gambling Anonymous meeting near me, quite often you'll be able to find the official website of, say, CODA or AA or whatever the case may be, and they'll give you a list of times and locations for meetings, and you can go to a meeting. It's completely free. They do work based off of donations, so if you benefit from them, by all means, like, feel free to chip in $20 or $100 or whatever you think is helpful. But it's completely free, completely volunteer run. I personally know people. So I've shared before that I've worked in addiction recovery clinics, and I've personally known people who completely 100% have tried therapy, didn't benefit from it, and then completely changed their life as a result of 12-step groups. So some people it doesn't vibe for, but I have respect because I personally know people whose lives have been saved by 12-step groups. So take a quick minute to mention that, as Katie Morton so eloquently brought up here.
It could be a great option for support and understanding. And it is important to know that things like AA, NA, or CA, Codependence Anonymous, are peer support, meaning that it's not led or supported by licensed professionals. Now, that doesn't make it better or worse. It's just something to know, because I've always believed that if something helps us, that's all that matters.
Yep.
So find what works for you and get that extra support. Oh, and I almost forgot, another key part of healing from codependency is going to be improving our self-care.
I want to make one additional, she does bring up the point that they're quite often not led by licensed therapists, but I will say one great thing about going to 12-step groups is you get access to a community of people who are also working through the same struggles that you're working through, which I think is kind of cool. Sometimes going to individual therapy can be awesome because you've got a therapist and it's a whole 1 hour session or 50 minutes or 90 minutes, whatever the case may be, where the person's just focusing on you, and that can be great. But sometimes having that community of people that are really working on themselves can be awesome, which is why I created A Place to Heal, right? Because I was working through my own stuff months ago, and I'm still in the process of working through stuff because we're all a work in progress. And I wanted to create a community for people to come in and share the stuff that they're, working on in regards to their mental health and personal development. And we can all be there to support each other and spread information and resources around. And so, yeah, but 12-step groups are another great place for that.
No, we hear that word all the time. And self-care we can think has to look like vacations or expensive massages or facials. That's not what I'm talking about. We do need to prioritize our basic needs. You know that HALT I talk about all the time, hungry, angry, lonely, tired? Well, we need to look into those things as well as taking our medication as prescribed or treating any illness we may have. Because when we're codependent, we put other people first, right? Remember what I said at the beginning, that they have an addiction to a thing or a substance, and our addiction is like making their life okay and keeping them going. Our addiction is them.
Yep.
Meaning that we're not putting any effort or any purpose, any focus on ourselves. And so a huge part of this is going to be putting some of that focus onto ourselves. And it's going to feel uncomfortable, and we're going to think we're being really selfish, or we're not putting other people first like we used to. So we're going to think we're bad, right? We can have some shame, blame, guilt, or embarrassment thoughts that come up as we do this. But I just encourage you to put that part of yourself and part of your work as a priority. I remember years ago, a friend of mine had said that they put their self-care in their calendar and make it non-negotiable. I encourage you to do this, even if it's just 10 or 15 minutes. Maybe that means that we get up a little earlier.
I don't know if you're here right now or not, but that sounds like something you do.
We spend a little time journaling about what's coming up for us, or doing some of the other work that I mentioned in the video. There's a lot of ways that we can prioritize ourselves, because even if we have to negotiate with our codependent self, we could say something like, if I plan to help other people, I can't pour from an empty pitcher. Right? We need to fill ourselves up first. And so I believe that the self-care component is going to be key as we try out any of the other ways that I mentioned. So just keep that in mind. Are we eating regularly, giving ourselves an opportunity to get enough sleep? Do we need to make an appointment to see our doctor, maybe get a physical, maybe finally get that ache, pain, itch in our throat looked at and taken care of? Maybe we need to prioritize taking a day off walking around our town, connecting with people, right? What does self-care look like for you? It doesn't have to be expensive or take a ton of time. It can if we want it to, but consider and maybe even share in the comments some ways that you take care of yourself on the regular. One of the ways that I do is I make time for stretching. I know, sounds kind of weird, but it is it. And I make sure that I eat every 3 to 4 hours. It's just the way that I take care of my body. I also drink a lot of water. That's another one. And as much as possible, which I'm really struggling with this lately, is I make sure that I set aside enough time for sleep. I try to get into bed, giving myself like the 8 to 9 hours I know I need. But
Yeah,
what are some things you do? Feel free to share. Overall, remember that healing from codependency isn't all or nothing. We are hoping to make progress little by little and slowly change our patterns of behavior. Being able to do more of these things in our life is really the end goal. Even if it's just every other time or once every 5 times we encounter a trigger. So do your best to be compassionate with yourself and your progress. It can and will get better, I promise. And as always, feel free to share anything that has helped you or thoughts that you have about codependency in those comments down below. Have a wonderful week. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.
So yeah, that's Katie Morton. She's awesome. And once again, Katie Morton, licensed marriage and family therapist. I have no idea where she works out of, but I know she is a big old star on YouTube. Shows up at the VidCon all the time. Would love to meet her one day. But yeah, that's a little bit of advice for working on codependency. I like that part at the end. She talked about really working on your relationship with yourself as one of the key ways of overcoming codependency. It's funny. Quite often, when you struggle with codependency, you get so good at just focusing on fixing the other person's life that, say, when that relationship ends, you realize, holy crap, I don't have a life of my own. And then, so honestly, one of the best things for people with codependency can actually be a time where you are just single. And again, if you struggle with it with your friends and stuff like that, then, or family members, then that's another conversation. But if, particularly in romantic relationships, if you struggle with it, honestly, spending some time to be single doesn't have to be forever. Doesn't have to be like 10 years, but 3 months, 6 months, year, whatever, to really just focus on your own life and develop a healthy relationship with yourself. Because again, we talked about at the beginning of the video, the last video, self-esteem issues, feelings of self-worth, feelings of self-love can all be things that we struggle with if we're someone with codependency issues. So in taking that time and taking a step back from relationships, we can really work on our relationship with ourselves and loving ourselves and filling our life up with activities that are meaningful and purposeful and fill us with joy so that we have more self-confidence and a greater sense of self-worth. So I really love that was the way that she ended the video. I 100% agree. So yeah, that is about an hour and a half on the dot, actually. Hour and a half on the dot. My introduction to codependency. I don't have a cute infographic. I actually will make one though, because I really do think like the whole codependency is a thing that I've had to really work to overcome myself. I will definitely make something cute and put it up both inside the resources section of the Discord channel, but also on my Instagram, where I post cool mental health stuff all the time. So if you're floating out there and you're watching and you'd like to check out some of my socials, I post mental health content on the regular. On my Instagram, it's a little bit more professional skewed. And also, I post all sorts of cool resources inside the resources section of the Place to Heal Discord server. So if you're not already a member of the Discord server, come hang out. Again, community, my vision for it is for us all to be one big community of psych-minded people working on our mental health, working on our journey of working on ourselves and sharing that with others and supporting people. So if you're looking for a supportive community of people interested in talking about mental health, we also talk about gaming, music, all sorts of stuff, come and hang by all means. But yeah, that's pretty much my mental health topic of the day, guys. What do we think? Did we learn anything today, class? I've also been like working on EQing my mic, so hopefully this sounded like a very like podcasty episode, because I'm really trying to get those vibes. So I think now is a good place. Rattaz says yes. Well, I'm glad you learned something today. It is my truest desire. I think I'm going to take a brief restroom break, refill my water. I honestly feel like I really want coffee, but I feel like at 9:30 at night, that's a terrible idea. So I will forego the coffee and just go with water. Take a little bathroom break, take a little water break, get up and stretch. I invite everybody to do that yourself if you've been sitting. This is when Rattaz, I just need to have like a little video of your stretch routines during our break so we can all do like a little stretch thing together. That'd be honestly really fun. So yeah, take care of yourself. I will be right back.